When does a hat become a bestseller? Well, when it's useful for just about everyone, of course. And this one has all of those things plus more. So hat, neck warmer or cowl if you prefer that, face cover or face warmer, headband, ponytail hat. So let me show you the pattern from our popular best-selling hat, neck warmer, headband, ponytail hat, face cover from our last year's collection. Let's go inside and let's get started. We're going to make two hats today. I'm going to show you two different techniques. One using my just regular sewing machine, and the other incorporating the use of the serger, which speeds it up a lot. Now I have to tell you that this seriously is a great little item if you want to make a bit of extra money at church bazaars or craft fairs. I highly recommend using this design and doing that. All right, I'm going to get started now. So we want to draft a pattern that is 23.5 inches wide, and that means going around the head, so that's your circumference, or 60 centimeters. And then the length of the pattern piece is going to be folded in half. It's 20.5 inches or 52 centimeters. So if you're going to make this for a man, I would add an inch or 3 centimeters in each direction just to compensate. So add an inch or 3 centimeters to that head circumference measurement. All right, so I'm going to cut it out and we'll get started with the sewing. I feel like I'm kind of cheating though a little bit by picking a fabric that is a plaid, because I get to just follow the lines of the print. If you know that you're going to make a hat or a neck warmer that's extra deep, you can always add more to this depth measurement than what I gave you. But you're going to see how it turns out with the measurements that I gave you. And then from there, you can use your own creativity to meet your own needs. Good quality fabric. This one is a polar fleece that has an obvious good side. And from 2 yards or 2 meters, you should be able to get 6 of these hat, neckband, head warmers, face covers out of that length of fabric. So we make lots of these. This is a really popular item on my online store, so I think you're gonna love it. So right side up. Now right sides together. Let's sew that back seam, and I'm going to top stitch as I do with my headbands to make a nice flat seam as well. And when you're making something like this from a fabric that has an obvious pattern that's linear, it's always handy just to clip or pin as you go along before you start sewing, just to make sure that those pieces of plaid line up. So now we're going to sew that seam. We're going to have a very long tube that's stretchy still, with a back seam that will be top stitched down nice and flat as well. So I have that back seam done now, and I've top stitched the seam flat. So on this side you've got a decorative stitch all the way on either side of the ditch, and on this side, on the inside, the seam is flat. Now here's a little bit of the tricky part. I've got the right sides together still, and I'm going to just flip it over so the seam is in the middle, facing down on the table. I'm just going to gather up my hat body, and I'm going to make sure that it's sandwiched inside the right side when I put these two ends of that back seam together. I'm going to put 2 pins here, and I'm going to sew from one pin all the way around, pulling out that seam as I go until I come to the other side to this other pin. So I'm going to leave this part open so that I can turn the piece right side out when I'm finished. So I'm going to back tack and sew about a 3/8 of an inch seam all the way around the edge until I come over here to the pin. Here are my pins and I'm ready to sew. So this is what your piece looks like now, kind of like a hand muff. And what we're going to do is we're just going to reach inside that little opening and pull the piece right side out. And just sort of adjust it. Let's find that seam that we just created. And here it is. And what we want to do is we want to work the seam up towards what I'm going to call the top of the hat. Because that seam now is going to become part of the channel that we are going to add our elastic to. And find a spot where you're happy with the way that the hat sits. Fleeces can be a little challenging sometimes, but because it's so stretchy, we've got lots of leeway. So now we're going to sew this little opening closed, and we're just going to sew close to the seam all the way around. We're going to top stitch right along, just away from that edge, about the width of the presser foot on your sewing machine, and just do a top stitch all the way around. When we get to the point where that seam is open here, we're going to go back and forth to give it a little bit of extra sewing to close it. Now I've gone on the other side of that seam and I've done another row, so it's got a double top stitch straddling that seam that we made when we closed it up. You can see it better on the other side, I think. And don't forget, this is the sewing machine version, the version that doesn't require a zigzag stitch or a serger. I'm going to show you next, after we finish this one, how I make them for my business, and I use a serger. Okay, so that area where the seams sort of meet is very well reinforced now. So I'm going to get my seam ripper and I'm just going to open up this bit of the back seam so that I can create a channel for my elastic to get fed into. So I'm just going to open up this seam now with my handy Lee Valley seam ripper. Lee Valley, I think it's .ca seam ripper. It comes in a kit of 2 with some extra blades, and if you're a serious sewer, I can't recommend these enough. This is sort of the rounded edge. There's one that's pointy too, but you have to be careful because the blades are sharp. So I'm just carefully going to cut into those stitches. And my top stitching means that the edges of this little channel are nicely finished. All right, now I'm going to thread my elastic through, which is a round elastic. You can use 1/4 inch flat elastic as well. This is a 1/16 of an inch shock cord. Comes on a spool like that, but I think you can buy it in small lengths at any fabric store, I would imagine. Certainly online at any store that sells outdoor fabrics and toggles, fasteners. Once it's threaded, get a toggle and you can just thread the 2 ends of the elastic through the toggle Tie a double knot in each piece at each end of elastic at the right length. You don't want the ends to be too long because when you pull the toggle, you're going to have some long ends that you're going to have to tie in a bow or tuck inside the hat. So that's a good length. All right, and now we have a wonderful neck warmer that we can tighten across our face if we want to pull it up to cover our nose and our mouth. But the trick is in the elastic and the toggle. So if you wanted a ponytail hat, you would leave this opening a little bit bigger, then we're going to close it for the actual hat. I'm going to tie those ends in a bow and then just tie those bow ends again. And there you have it. A lovely hat. If you want to hide this toggle and bow, you can just turn it inside out. And the toggle and the extra elastic will just be at the top of the hat. If you want a really baggy hat, you can make that length longer, and then you wouldn't even feel that if it was tucked inside. You've got a little bit of extra if you want to turn it up at the bottom and have a cuff as well so that it fits closer to your head. And it actually looks nice with the toggle and the elastic on the outside. It just adds a bit of interest to it. All right, now I'm going to show you how I make it with my serger. I'm going to cut it out. I'm going to sew up the back seam the same way that I did the white and black check, and then we're going to finish off that closing seam differently. All right, I've sewn it together at the back, and I did my top stitching, so my seam is nice and flat. It'll never bother anybody wearing it. It'll just feel like one piece. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew these two raw edges together, and I'm going to sew them wrong sides together so that the right side is on the outside, on both the inside and the outside, and I don't need to leave any gap for turning right side out. I'm just going to sew all the way around. And I will go do that now, and I'll do that with my serger. I have serged that edge all the way around now, and I have my tube. So now I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the other one and create a channel for the elastic to go through. And we're going to just top stitch this serged edge down so it looks like a flat lock. So the serge stitch will just make that flat, and it'll go through both layers. So we're going to do it nice and neatly. I'll probably use my magnetic measure guide, my seam measure. Now I'm ready to sew this seam flat down, and I'll just do my single needle stitch inside that serge all the way around. Now I'm going back and forth over that back seam a number of times because we're going to cut into that channel like we did with our first hat. So this is sort of a fake way of doing the flat lock stitch. If you have a flat lock machine, by all means use that. All right, so there's our stitch. So I'm going to open up this seam and I'm going to thread the elastic through. First though, before I do that, I'm going to do another line of top stitching on the other side of that serge just to reinforce it so that this seam never comes apart. All right, I've done my second line of reinforcing back and forth. And now I'm just going to open up that first seam that I made down to the reinforcing. So now I'm going to thread some elastic all the way around, coming out the other side, and put a toggle on it. So just like the other one, pull it together, tie these extra lengths in a bow, you can make this hole bigger if you're going to use it as a ponytail hat. And look at that. We'll undo this. There we have a nice deep neck warmer that can again bring it up over your nose and your mouth when it's very cold. 2 layers of soft, warm, premium, cozy fleece. Pull it together at the top and voila, you have a hat. Now I get to try them on. Love it? I love this too. So look, you've got some great ideas now for Christmas presents for everyone in your family. And what could be better than making it yourself? And it's a super easy sewing project too, as you've just seen. So it's a great project to give maybe even a young person who just wants to get started and learn how to sew on a sewing machine. So if you love this video, please consider subscribing to this channel because I really appreciate your support, and that gives me the motivation to keep sharing my patterns from 36 years in the millinery world. And I'm just about to get ready to start thinking about retiring. So I'm going to continue to teach hat making and share my patterns over the course of the next few years. So if you have comments or any suggestions, leave them below and I will reply to all of you. In the meantime, happy sewing. Make lots of these 5-in-1 hat, neck warmer, headband, ponytail hat, face covering for everyone in your family. Or hey, go back and look through my channel because I've got lots of great projects already. You could start your own little hat business. All right, till we meet again. Thanks for watching. Bye.